I'm Nastasia Tebeck, and as Katrina mentioned, yep, I am the Director of Product Design at MedBridge. So I've been in the design and tech industry now for probably about 9 years. I got started in Chicago at a logistics company called Coyote Logistics as a sort of self-taught UX designer. Didn't know what it was before I joined, and then been able to work with a lot of great companies over the years on all different types of products. So everything from mobile and web apps. I've also worked at United Airlines for a while doing their mobile experience as well as their sort of day of travel experience. And then, and then also like profile management. And then at Amazon, I worked on multimodal where I shipped and helped build and ship the first V1 device, Echo Show. I worked on a lot of platform and systems design as well as feature design. And did a lot of settings and onboarding experience as well when I was there. So I also really love community and reaching out to people. So I tend to sort of build programs and community things at every company I go to. So I had also at Amazon, I had built a couple things like called Design Breakfast and Drawing After Dark and other ways that creatives and people across Amazon could connect that end up getting scaled globally. So very much into the community and very much into product design as well. So
great. Awesome. Thank you. And so just for everyone to know, we have a series of questions that we're going to ask Nastasia tonight. And then plus we have collected a few questions before the event. So we'll include those as well toward the end. And then we're going to after we go through the default questions, we're going to open the floor up for Q&A. So with Zoom, we discovered that there's a way that you can ask questions and that you can rate your questions, so we can definitely try out that feature and we'll see how that goes. So with that, Natasha, can you tell me a little bit more about transitioning into leaderships? When did you transition into leadership management and what was it like?
Yeah, I actually transitioned early February. It's probably like Feb 10th, 12th, somewhere around there. It was really good because I had actually taken a month off in between jobs from Amazon and transitioning into MedBridge. And it was kind of some good advice that various peers and other leaders had mentioned, like when you're going to start into a whole new experience and take a different set of responsibilities, like take some time and for yourself. And so I did that. So when I came in, I felt very refreshed and I was ready. So it's been a lot of fun. I would say the biggest change, I think you probably have heard this before, but the biggest change is going from making to leading. And even though MedBridge is a smaller company, I run a team of 3 designers. And so we're kind of in the transition where we're not really a startup anymore and we're kind of scaling. And with that, it's also a way for me to step back and actually transition into a director role and to be more management style and leader as well, less hands-on making and designing day to day. I know depending on company and size of team, that varies for different people. But so far it's been really interesting and it's challenged me in different ways of just having to see like, what does design thinking look like when it comes to process? What does design thinking look like when it comes to org management? Like bigger questions or like strategy holistically across products. So it just opens the door for just a different set of ways to learn than I was previously doing. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And like, definitely agree that it's one thing to be able to do the work, and it's another thing to be able to lead others to doing great work. So thank you for sharing your point of view there. And what was something that you wish you knew earlier in your career? Or maybe we can redirect it to like maybe something you wish you knew before you transition into a leadership position. You can maybe answer to a little bit of both directions.
Okay. I think that one of the things actually transitions on both. So knew earlier in my career as well as leadership, and I actually heard it, but you don't really know what it means fully until you're like swimming in it. But soft skills are a must, and I think that there's the understanding that your hard skills have to be there. You have to know what you're doing, obviously, quality design work, know your tools, but soft skills when it comes to communication, how you're presenting, how you're articulating your design decisions, how you are speaking with leadership. That is ultimately, I feel like, the bread and butter of how you will succeed in the roles. And so I know that as you progress from, a junior level role and you start moving up, you have to have more of these conversations where your voice is the voice in the room as the stakeholder. And so understanding what that means. And so now I get to work directly with, other directors, PMs. My boss is the COO. And I work with VPs. So it's just another level of communication that also is different type of communication that was in the beginning. So that's a must. And then I would say the other thing, I guess, that works for both, I'm getting better at it now. Didn't really know much about it when I started, and it seems so obvious now, but like, find mentors and community to lead on. When I first started, I wasn't really aware of meetups and mentors and that whole process until probably 3 years in. And that's when I kind of like had an aha moment and discovered meetups. And so I've been able to gain community, but yeah, I didn't start there. So, and then the same with the leadership. As I've transitioned to leadership, it's been interesting. Now it seems a lot easier to find people who are green or mid-level career, maybe getting into senior, but it's a lot harder to sort of start building your network in the management leadership realm. And so I've been going out and trying to do the same thing, like see if I could find a mentor, or if not, like join some Slack communities, join conversations like this, where like you're talking and expressing yourself and asking for tips and tricks at a leadership level and at a management level, which is just different conversations from otherwise.
Yeah. And definitely that's something like that we talked about in one of our previous chat, is that sometimes it's not necessarily easy to find materials, especially when you were talking about soft skills. And I actively look for materials and resources for leaderships, like skills and like soft skills, like what is it that you need to know. But there's just like not one answer to it. And this, like, of course, there's like books and etc. and other like materials that you can look through. But definitely Meetup is a great way, Slack is a great way. And that's the reason why we're doing this event, and to kind of like help connect leaders in the industry together, so we can share experience and share notes and learn from each other. And did you mention anything about like what you wish to know about early in your career? Like, because I think you did, you're self-taught UXer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe you can speak a little bit about that, as like in what you wish you knew earlier, like before entering UX.
Yeah, I think I wish I just knew it existed. I mean, like I had mentioned, I kind of like stumbled into it. And the way I actually got into it was like, I was working at Coyote and I was an account scheduler for logistics. So I was like scheduling freight, moving and shipments from customer to carriers. And it was just a whole different experience. But as I was being trained, I had to give a presentation about myself. And instead of doing a PowerPoint, I decided to do sort of like a comic strip reel of just 4 slides of me. And I'm also an illustrator. So this was like kind of my last, I don't know, flag of being like, here we are, we're going into the desk world and office land, and there goes my creativity. But so it was like my way of just kind of being like, I'm going to show up and here's me. So I went the extra mile. Lucky for me, the CEO was there, the exec team was there. They pulled me off of what I actually was hired at Coyote to do and gave me the opportunity to illustrate big ideas. And so when I heard that, I was like, sure, that sounds awesome. Like, I don't know what that means, but sure. And so, yeah, I immediately joined the development team, and I worked directly under the chief innovation officer. And they basically just set me up for success. They're like, learn whatever you want to learn. Here's a computer, take whatever training. And what I didn't know then is I was actually storyboarding, is what we call it now, but like basically just visualizing these big picture ideas of what products could be on huge sheets of paper and put them all up in the office. And so once I realized that that was storyboarding, and I started going through the process of problem solving when they're like, hey, make us a mobile app. And I'm like, I don't even have a smartphone. I don't even know what that means. And so there's a lot of just like step-by-step problem solving that made a ton of sense to me. And then when I discovered UX, I was like, oh, wait, this is a thing. Like, never heard about this before. I think vaguely knew that graphic design existed, but it wasn't, technology and design wasn't in my household or how I grew up outside of like fine art and drawing. So I just wasn't exposed to it. But once you kind of put your toe in the water and you start kind of exposing yourself, there's so much out there. So I've spoken with people who are like recently transitioning into UX and people younger, and have helped out with like junior achievement programs in middle school and high school, like just trying to expose them to what UX is, so then they know that there's another path, another idea that they could walk down earlier. Yeah, so.
Great, awesome. And yeah, definitely. I do feel that like nowadays has been like more and more materials that you can learn from regarding UX. And I know that for a fact that a lot of people transition into UX because it just wasn't a field of study, like say 10 years ago, or if it was not popular. So definitely people who are interested in UX today are fortunate that there are many different channels that you can go through. There are lots of like free online materials, and as well as like classes that you can take online or in person otherwise. And with that, let's move on to the next sections, which we want to go into a little bit of a day-to-day process of what it's like at your current workplace. So what's your team made up and how do you function?
Yeah, so I have a team of 3 product designers, and they do really end to end. And so right now, when I walked into the team, it is product design. So they will go ahead and go do discovery research as well as usability testing. They're making flow diagrams all the way down to UI, and they're also redlining and following the process all the way through. So it really is like a full end-to-end experience. And before I got there, they've done an amazing job at just being able to manage cross products, cross solutions, and sort of kind of champion on their self. And so when I walked in, it was kind of like, okay, like how could we, like what do you need from me? How could I make this better? How can I, improve the process here? So so we are currently a team of 4 that includes me. And so my role is really about UX strategy, all up of like holistically sort of like what MedBridge is doing in the market, what are our products trying to convey, like where can we make them better, and as well as the biggest part of I would say my function right now is really process, and whether it's design process and kind of getting sort of structure in place, or it's figuring out the process between product managers, developers, and UX and or experience design, product design, whatever you want to call it, and like how they all work together. And so because it's a scaling company, there's a lot of new stuff and a lot of uncharted territory for a lot of people. So I would say a big portion of my day to day is thinking about process and putting in some structure in place. And then lastly, on the other side, it's really about design management, career building, seeing the strengths of my designers, seeing opportunities of how to make them better, providing the support as well. So
Great, awesome. And the next question is, what are your biggest challenges today? So I guess like there's definitely different challenges as you become a manager versus as you working as an IC. So maybe you can speak a little bit about both.
Yeah. So being an IC prior, I think the biggest challenges I had before was that I would call it like there's always more doors, more earning trust, and more mountains to climb. And in a sense of like getting the visibility to be seen as someone as a leader or someone who has ideas, also like getting promoted and paid as much, levels and priorities, like I would say in politics matters to larger companies, and they can. But at the same time, I've noticed that like, as you transition and sort of move up, other challenges will occur, but then some of the previous challenges you have are kind of out the door. So, so before I was like, I want like visibility and to work at a higher level more strategically. And as an IC, you sometimes have a chance to do that, but a lot of times you're like in the execution stage, so you don't get as much time as you would like. So in leadership, it's a little bit different. So I would say more of the biggest challenges today, I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think it's really sort of getting everyone at a shared understanding of how to work with each other from the design team, development, and PM. Like, what is good product development and design process mean to people, and how do they all work together? Also providing some structure to make sure that the products we produce are quality. So a lot of the things were like they were happening already, but it's more about just like driving consistency. So you set a level of expectation. So everything from like making sure we do design QA processes, or like we have a good format and a working knowledge of how to file bugs, or how the process of how to work with design. And so I think within those, trying to make structure around it is also just, it's a challenge in that it's new. And I think previous experience is like a lot of that stuff is already done, and you kind of just walk in, and like here it's like, okay, you have to sort of lay the track at this place. So, which is fun because it's different. It's just a different challenge. Yeah. And then I would say that, and I would say my primary emphasis really feels on communication and sort of teaching and education. Yeah. Setting expectations. And so just being reminded that these are the types of challenges that you will get as a leader.
Yeah, that's great. And I do have a follow-up questions regarding that. I'm wondering, like, do you find that as you face new challenges and develop new skills, do you ever feel that you might lose some of the previous skills that you develop? It's like you learn one thing and then you're able to do it, and then realizing, oh, there was like things that you were able to do well as an IC, or maybe like you were able to do quickly as an IC, and then like now that you might be losing that skills a little bit. Because like I'm just wondering about that, because I, like, from my experience, I do feel that like sometimes it's kind of like you learn one thing new, it's great, but then like you might slowly make some mistakes that you would have made like earlier in your career, that like the challenges that you were able to manage well, and now, yeah. So I don't know, like, how do you feel about that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think some of the things to me when I think about it, I'm trying to figure out how do I take some of the best practices of my IC work and incorporate them into right now. And so I may not be like designing interfaces anymore and doing like layouts, but when I talk about process, I'm building flow charts. Or like when I talk about like, hey, this is what how you're going to do design QA, here is a visual for that. So like I'm trying to take some of the things I had strengths in, were like I was very strong in documentation, very strong in interaction design and IA, and so taking some of that and like, how do I infuse that into this role so I'm still kind of using some of the tools. But some of the other things, like, you will move on and you will change. And I think that there's a previous manager had mentioned to me before that when we had our one-on-ones, he would talk to me and say like, okay, when you think about your strengths and all your skills and everything you've known and acquired to this date, there's 3 buckets. And like, he wanted me to separate out like what lives in the bucket that like you can't do without. Like if you didn't get to do it every week to week, you would just feel like ruined. You wouldn't feel good anymore. And like, what are those like handful of things? And then there's a middle bucket where it's like, yeah, I can do it. Like, I still want to do it at some point. I don't need to do it every day. I'm okay doing with it like a couple times a year, maybe in and out. It's a little bit less. And then there's a bucket of like, I know how to do this, have no desire to do it anymore. Like, I'm fine if I never have to do this again. And so yeah. I think by separating those 3 into buckets, it helps you sort of understand like, oh, every position I go into, every project I take, or every role I go to, you're making sure that you're meeting those needs and you're not giving up essentially what you would regret later. So, yeah, like for me, I'm like, I haven't like redlined anything since my very first design job, because I went into interaction design and I was like full force into the front half. So I'm fine with never having to redline again. But, if I had to do it, I would probably be rusty. So I think it's just like, it's just those, those realizations that like you have to be okay with. But then being adaptable is super important because like you say, like you will literally learn a new thing every single company, every single team you're on in the same company. Like I've had to learn so many different like project management software, different tools, different, like whether we're going from illustration to sketch and now Figma, like, it's just like you're always going to learn something. And so you kind of like, I think when design, you kind of just have to be like willing to adapt and move around, and like it's going to ultimately just be a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And like, I love the idea of like putting things into the 3 buckets. I think that's like a great way to look at it. And so I think that also like helps you set priorities for yourself for what you want to do with your career. So I think that's great advice. And so what does success looks like today?
Yeah, right now I would say probably in the near future, success looks like having equal partnership across PM, dev, design, making them products that we all feel good about together, having design included in the conversation, whether it's around scoping, whether it's around resourcing, or ideas. And so like it's happening, but there's still room to grow. And so I think with everything, so it's kind of like, let's get there. That feels successful. I think making progress on process and sort of design standardization. So whether it's like, hey, we're going to start trying to chip away and build a design system where then we make conscious decisions so it's actually easier for us in the long run, or hey, we're going to start presenting in this certain way now, let's build some templates and decks and things to like some tools to help have a consistent way we're talking, when we talk to leadership. So I think it's like how we put those things into place, and then ultimately it's really about supporting, strengthening, and growing my team. And so one thing I've always, I mentioned to the team when I first started, because I had my previous director mention it to me too, like she's always like, oh, I have your back. And like, especially if you're used to being an IC that hasn't not either like been seen, but like hasn't had like direct management kind of, giving you direction, you're kind of floating in your own world. Like as soon as, you acquire a certain level of skills to make sure you can do your job. And then when you have a design leader come in who like is like, hey, I support you, like let me be your shield, or let me have some of these like hard conversations that you've had to like weed through with people. And that was really good to hear and interesting, because like I haven't like specifically been told that before. It also allowed me to kind of step back and not feel like I had to like be every convo or do everything. And so so I think by telling the team that I'm like supporting them if they ever need me to like have a conversation with someone or like help resolve anything or just really back them up, like that's what I'm there for. And so making sure that they feel comfortable in that as well.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds awesome. And what are some of the goals for your design team this year?
Some of the goals. All right. So I will say process all day, but yeah, so I think design process just in a way of like having some consistency and cohesiveness in how like product design is approached, how we're putting products out into the world, and making sure that we all feel good about it and we've reviewed them. Design evangelism, I would say, whether it's like teaching other disciplines about product design and the skills that we can bring to the table. And like I said, if you're at a company where design is a new thing, or like you've had design, but it's very homegrown, there's probably not going to be like a huge understanding of how everything works together unless someone comes in with a bunch of experience. So I've taken it upon to like try to educate other people in the company, like whenever I can. Recently gave an all hands presentation about what is product design to the entire company. And it was awesome because everyone got to watch it, and as well as all the designers got to present little snippets about the work that they do. And that, I don't know if that may have been like the first time they've had like the platform to do it at that level company wide, but trying to find ways of like, hey, we exist. Hey, this is what we can do. Work with us too. We're awesome. So a little bit more of that. And then a lot of it goes into whether it's career building. So I found some awesome frameworks online of basically like breaking it down of what it means to move from IC to like lead principal or say manager and all the way to executive. What are the expectations? And so I've been working through this framework to kind of see where I can tweak it specifically for MedBridge, but how I would approach leadership, and then having the designers sort of look through that and get to know what their strengths and opportunities and where they want to grow. So that sort of career development plan is also one of the things in place. And then I think the other two would be trying to really develop what I've read online called sort of, if anyone's ever heard the term KPI before, key performance indicator, but sort of identifying like what are design KPIs and what are like metrics for success. And so I think we have maybe some general ideas, but sometimes they're not as obvious as like, oh, hey, how many like checkouts you've had at this register equals this. And so I've been reading a lot about it. I haven't formed any solutions yet, but just trying to understand like what are the different ways you could approach what design KPIs or what success and design metrics can be measured throughout the life cycle of products. Yeah, so those are probably the primary ones. I'm always trying to make also bandwidth so we can do some, what we call them at Amazon, where think big exercises, but basically just having some bandwidth to do strategic projects and initiatives. They're not resourced. It's just to kind of show you that you can think larger and wider, put together a pitch deck or a presentation and be able to say like, hey, look at this idea. We should do this project. It worked for a lot of people in my design org at Amazon. It was exciting to see that turn into real things. And so I think just sort of getting this sort of stream of innovation and think big outside of just the roadmap is something I want to push in there.
Yeah, that's great. And so the next question is, I think you already touched a little bit on it. So the next question is, what kind of ongoing skill training or career building do you encourage your reports to do? Like maybe, like, is there any like specific like courses or I don't know, like sites that you use for training purposes?
Yeah, after getting to know the designers and sort of asking like, you know, what do they feel like their strengths were and what their goals were and what their objectives were as designers, and trying to see like, okay, where are there any opportunities that they want to strengthen, whether that's, you know, hearing about visual design or getting more experience with different types of research methods, you know. So being able to either support them in a sense of like, hey, go train and fill in whatever like gap or whatever hard skill that you would like to, you know, raise up. And I know that like SVC has a lot of great classes. I know there's a lot of online training that they could do as well. I'm a big advocate of StrengthsFinder 2.0 by Gallup, the research team. And we did a bunch of StrengthsFinders workshops at Amazon, and I would love to do one with the team this year. And it's really just changing the mindset of like, you determine what your top 5 strengths are, if anyone hasn't heard from it, by answering a series of questions. And then you understand how you do your best work and what your strengths are as a person. And then ultimately from that, you can use it as a source with your managers as like, hey, I'm really good at doing these things. And then you can use that to your advantage for different types of projects. And it becomes less about, oh, what do you need help with or what are you not doing well, and more about like, oh, you do this thing really well because you think this way or this comes really natural to you, so we need to put you on this type of work because you're going to get the most most productivity and most, you know, excitability from your designer. So it worked well for us. Like, people can go and do it online right now. I think it's like $19, but like there's a workshop that also goes along with it where then you understand like what it means, what each strength means, how strengths work together, how people can then work together. And so, yeah, and that really helps.
Yeah, that's great. And what is the name of that site again?
It's called StrengthsFinder 2.0, and it's by Gallup, Gallup. Yeah.
Finder 2.0 by Gallup. Cool. And so what are some of the fun morale building activities that you want to share?
Yeah, it's funny because it's like, I feel like I was in the office for maybe like 3 weeks before COVID happened, or it all kind of happened really fast. Yeah. So I know one thing that made me feel welcome is like when I started, our team had a team lunch for me, and like we all got to like just hang out. And I also noticed that like our dev team is really awesome, and they also do a lot of fun things, and they also include the designer a lot of the time. So yeah, like on Fridays they did like fun lunches, and like they plan different activities for the product team, which also includes PM as well. So I was building off of what they had as far as just like the participation goes. But during the COVID, yeah, we've had a couple of like virtual hangouts where it was more company wide, because MedBridge does like a social every Friday every Friday afternoon. And so we got to participate in that. As far as specific design ones, we unfortunately haven't been able to do anything specifically while during this COVID, even though we talked about doing a virtual happy hour. But we all agree that once we get back together, we're going to do like a team day and just like go spend time together and do something fun. And it does seem like the team wants to definitely do things in person. So I think we'll plan for something after all this COVID.
And you're in a different challenge too compared to other leaders, because like you said that you're in office for a few weeks, and then with the COVID you're like so you just earn very special skills on how to do things online.
Right, exactly.
So, and so are any tips or tricks to give for someone starting out in management or leadership in general?
Yeah, I would say one of the first things is get to know your team. And I know one of the very first things is I want to set up one-on-one. So I would advise like immediately setting up on weekly occurrence one-on-ones with your team, and have syncs and put structure into place, and really get to know basically again like their strengths, their goals, what are their current project, what's going well, or what needs work from their perspective. And then also get a one-on-one on the books with your manager and build a relationship. I know managers probably your next level up is going to be super busy. So if it's not automatically happening, take the initiative to do it. I think setting up monthly syncs with other peers is crucial. So whether it's your lead PMs, your lead devs, even whether it's about just like you all communicating and understanding each other, or you actually use that time to get feedback on how your design team is doing, and so you get to build a relationship with them. And so then I would just say again, like be a coach and offer support and provide the shield when necessary. And so
cool.
like those would be the first tips to like get you on the right foot, because you want to earn trust and sort of understand your world and have some context before just going in and saying things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I like the sync, the regular sync meetings. I think that's definitely helpful, especially when you're in a leadership position. You expect to be able to work well across different teams, and so like having like that sync meeting in place, I think it's great. Then you can talk about issues and pauses and whatnot, because like sometimes things that working well for your team may not be so well, maybe making it like painful for the development team. Speaking from experience, that could happen. And so it's nice to have that channel to be able to exchange information and make sure that's like we're finding a balance that works for everyone. And any books or tools, resources you recommend or you're currently looking into?
Yeah, so resources, definitely join all the Slack channels.
All the Slack channels in the world.
All the Slack channels, I know. Yeah. Definitely join this one. There's also a great one in Seattle called UX, I think it's UX Seattle. And that one is great for all things UX. There's a Seattle Designers Slack channel, which is awesome because it goes across different creative groups. They're very large and they're very active. And then the one that I just recently joined, if anyone is interested in joining, but it's for basically people in new management and specifically leaders, and it's called Design Leaders, and it's set up by a guy named Tanner. I think he works in New York, I'm pretty sure, but it goes across, it spans, it's not just to Seattle. And so those have been great. as far as books, I have gotten one thing is, as I was transitioning away from Amazon, I actually got a ton of books and recs and gifts from people that, you know, that I love, that
Oh,
were
they
on
were
my
sending you
team.
away. Oh, nice.
Yes. So I'm still currently reading, and I will show this one. This is a book called Design Leadership. It's an O'Reilly book by Richard Banfield. It's how to top design leaders build and grow successful organizations. But it's been super helpful because it talks about whether it's culture, talent, just about office space, finding balance, leadership styles. So I'm still currently reading that one. But I mean, like, I pulled these books here because I'm a huge bookworm, so I got to read all the things. So everyone told me to read Making the Manager. I haven't yet, but I hear it's a very good book, by Julie Zhao. This was my previous manager was reading it, and everyone I knew. It's called Radical Candor. It's specifically about communicating. Gallup actually released a book that one of my good friends, his design lead, recommended. It's called First Break All the Rules. And it says what the world's greatest managers do differently. And they do like 10 years of research where they've interviewed everyone from like police officers to corporate CEOs on like what has made good managers. So this one as well. And then the last two I got, like I said, I got a lot of them. Was there is one, the Book Apart series called Resilient Management, and it's one of like the little thin books, by Laura Hogan, and this other one about emotional intelligence and like leadership presence. So got a lot of leadership books and management books. I feel like a lot of my time off was also reading those things, but as far as like doing the other type of stuff in your day-to-day, reading Articulating Design Decisions, by Tom Griever, who's pretty awesome, because I think, as I mentioned, communication is so key in being able to speak about what these decisions are. And then UX Strategy. I know it's an older book. I know Jamie Levy is writing an updated edition, but these two I feel like are very significant for the other work that's outside of just leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think those are important points too, because like as design leaders, you need to be selling the ideas to stakeholders and like
exactly.
your management. So those are like very good and important skills to have, although it doesn't only apply to leaders.
Right. Yep.
And so, so the next question, those of you who are looking for jobs should pay attention. Are you hiring?
So currently, because of COVID, we aren't actually hiring as of right now. So we were scheduled to have headcount for this year. It's still an open option, as I'm told. I need researchers, I need product designers, and I would love a visual design leader too. So I definitely have a vision on how the team will be made up. So as soon as we start getting kind of the green light to be like, hey, we can put some more people on my team, I will be looking. But in the meantime, I mean, I know a handful of people, but if you're super interested in healthcare and really passionate, whether it's about research, about product design, or visual, we're trying to build a design system and all things around branding. So if you seem super into it and want to know more, or just have a connection, and show me your stuff, please reach out. I'm open to connecting.
Great. So we're going to go through the questions that was left on the Meetup page first. Let's see, let me get to it. Okay, so the Meetup page questions. This one is from Jessica. What are some ways you positioned yourself to stand out early on as a self-taught UX professional?
Yeah, I think some ways to stand out early on is really, I think it's really about going above and beyond and sort of looking around corners on how you can help. So I think it's one thing, like I mentioned with the presentation I did, I went above just putting together a PDF. And I think a PowerPoint, I think caring about the details and like pushing the limits of whether it's how you present yourself, the level of documentation, the level of, whether it's communication and professionalism, whatever it is, but like find extra ways that you could like turn up the notch just a little bit. And so I know as a manager, I know that those types of things really catch my eye, and I know that they catch other people's eyes that I've worked with as well. And also, I think being someone who is consistent in the sense of like that, you know, that you're bringing your A game to the table all the time. Like, you know, that you're going in there and you're going to like set the bar high for yourself and like meet that bar to whoever your manager is, whoever the people you're reporting to. And it helps you stand out that, oh, this is someone we can rely on. This is someone we can trust. I could give that project to that person because they like have their head on straight and seem like a good, you know, they're doing good work. So yeah, I would say a couple of those things.
Great, awesome. And just a quick response to the questions about book lists. Somebody asked about it. Just for everyone to know, we're organizing the list of everything, and we will post it on the Slack channel, and we can also email that out after this, just for everybody to know, because I know everybody one is like, oh, taking notes.
All the books.
All the books in the world that you can read.
Yeah.
You are well loved. You have so many books given to you.
So many books. I love them.
Nice.
I have all the resources for you.
Yeah, that's great. And Jessica has a second question. Do you have 1 to 3 tips for someone who is self-taught and applying for their first job in the field?
Yes.
I think you did touch on it a little bit, but maybe just like
yeah, a little bit on, so a little bit trying to do things that go above and beyond. But I think more specifically when you're applying for your first job, and this makes me think of the portfolio and how you're presenting yourself. One thing that I know that stands out a lot when I was on hiring loops at Amazon, and also what I've given as feedback at being a mentor, is that, you know, everyone, well, maybe not everyone, bold statement, but like a lot of people can go in and essentially take a website that needs to be redesigned, or take a mobile app that isn't working that needs to be redesigned. And a lot of these sort of redesign projects are very, I would say, like they're just normal and they're typical for a lot of people starting out. And so I think one way to sort of push the envelope is actually connect in a different way of like, and I think of it in these 2 ways. It's like, one, what is technology currently doing right now? And what are some big players in the market that have, whether it's devices, whether it's just tech, like VR, AR, whatever it is, but like, what's some forward thinking tech that you could use as a concept when coming up with an inspirational or a hypothetical project that relates to something that is existing? So for instance, like if you're like, oh, okay, this is just like here's an Amazon reference, but say, you know, Alexa exists, you know, Echo Show exists, there's a screen, like there's a whole section where anyone can go make Alexa skills and developers could do it. So like, I would challenge someone like, hey, you could go take a product off the market and be like, I'm going to build a skill. Like I'm going to do a case study that shows what something can look like on Alexa. Like that's more forward thinking than just the typical like redesign of like an everyday thing. So linking it to tech and technology will make you look and sound more strategic, more innovative. And then the other aspect is a lot of people love like also then super flashy things. And I think that really deciding that you're going to put problem solving and effort into industries and organizations that really need it or matter, that are underserved, is huge. So like instead of maybe, you know, doing like an obvious design of something, like what are certain areas in the communities that may be struggling, that like maybe it's not the most glamorous, but like if they had a designer, it would be like changing, like whether it's like the police force, you know, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's, you know, your local practitioner, the shop down the street, and there's just like anything that has to do with like civics. And so sometimes it's not seen as like the biggest thing, but there's so many industries out there that are really awesome to do case studies on and to think about as a design professional that may just not get the attention right away. But like I've just seen so many amazing presentations at conferences about people who literally just like redesigned how reporting is done for police, and it's just like incredible. Like it's like it's simple concepts, but like the whole thing was just really thoughtful. And so it's just, yeah, it's like trying to either be like super mindful or thoughtful about like certain type of industries or people that really need things, or focusing on technology that's really out there, that's very current, and like how can you link some of those ideas into what you're building in a portfolio.
Yeah, I think those are really great advice, because I think I have heard from many more junior people who are fresh, starting fresh, that they may lack real life examples, projects,
Yeah,
and so I think that's a really good advice. Or the like whoever went through the same boot camp have like all the same projects.
yeah,
So that it could be a turn off from a hiring manager perspective, because if I'm seeing the same project from like 3 candidates, then then it makes you feel less interested. So like taking any like real life experiences and then designing it out, applying UX strategies to redesign things, I think that's definitely a great call. And then also like one little advice is that like if there's like a dream job that you have, like if you really really want to work at Amazon or really really want to work at Google, maybe take one of their existing product and do that exercise, and definitely I think that would help get extra points.
yeah, exactly what you said, because you're seeing, hiring managers and people, they're seeing, stacks and stacks of applications and portfolios, and they're taking seconds to look through things. And so it's, yeah, there's a lot of people out there, and I think it's really thinking about either how you could position yourself as a strategic thinker who's thinking about other concepts that are fresh, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, real life experience. It's just like you're thinking about stuff that makes
Yep.
people curious about you. And then, or exactly, like if you're going to apply somewhere, like put in the due diligence of like, hey, why do you want to work there? Because we could all work in it, like we could all apply anywhere and we could all try to work anywhere, but why is it that you want to work at this company versus that company, and use those into your portfolio
Yeah,
to get your
exactly.
job.
Exactly. Cool.
It's
And
charming. Oh,
go
I
ahead.
just want to say that we have a few minutes before we hit the 7-minute mark, so this might
Okay.
last question before we transition into Q&A from the
Q&A.
audience.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we only have like one more from the Meetup page, and then we can go to Q&A from the audience. One note for the audience, with the Q&A feature, there is a way that you can vote for the questions. So maybe you can take a look at the questions and then mark the ones that you're more interested in, and then we will go start with the more popular ones first with that. So take a look. And going back to that remaining, that one last questions from the Meetup page. This is from Nora. So Nora asks, "What does leadership mean to you?"
What leadership means to me?
Yeah, what does it mean to you?
What does it mean?
It's a tough one.
Okay, yeah. So what leadership means to me? I think it's about sort of transitioning into the next step where you're providing all of your knowledge, all the tools that you've gained and the experience thus far, and you're really focused on, we said it back at Amazon, I think, but we really focused on like people, product, and process, and like these 3 pillars of P's that you sort of bring to the table. And as you transition into leadership, it's kind of like, how much have you nurtured each of those sections, and what are you bringing in your experience? So like how much product history and knowledge and expertise do you really have around, in your background that you could bring here? How much process knowledge do you have to navigate these larger discussions, to put good things into place and to champion on even when though it feels hard, and do some very are you then capable of doing organization-wide changes? And then also, how have you developed the people side? Like, are you a person that, is very connected with your team, but also are you a person that's connected with the larger company? Are you invested in what the mission is that your company does? Are you invested in people just outside of your circle? And like, what are you doing for the community, whether it's inside or outside? And so I think a leader is someone who really focuses on these 3 things and has championed in a ton of different ways under each of those pillars. And I think people who are able to do it well and like balance and push themselves, and being great leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And so, yeah, so I think we can go ahead and start our Q&A. It's right at 7. Perfect timing too. we knew it.
Yeah.
We planned it to the second. So,
Yep.
okay, so let's see how this works. So again, this is the first time trying this out. It looks like you can mark answered too. So let's see how that works. Okay, so I see the most popular one is from Allison. Do you have examples to show us of ways you have shared your leadership experience in your portfolio? That's a good one. Like, how do you highlight your leadership skills in portfolio?
Yeah. So actually, it's funny because the portfolio that I set up to get hired at MedBridge actually focused on those 3 pillars. So, yeah, I know that I sort of document them on my own, and I'm trying to like keep a running tab of them. But yes, in my portfolio specifically, I had to sort of come up with like a product strategy across like how I was going to approach my role at MedBridge. And so I kind of took a step back and was like, all right, well, how about instead of an exact 3-year product strategy, I'm going to talk about what my philosophy is around design and leadership in general, and what are some things that I feel like are good practice. And so again, yeah, so when I went through it, I did show a couple case studies that I had of like my own IC work, but when it came to more of the leadership, it was like, okay, here's everything in people that I've done and that I would be into doing. And so it had a list of like the programs that I had built, the different types of ways that I've brought people together in the community, how I've impacted other colleagues, how I've made their lives easier by coming up with different processes and systems. I had a process bucket, again, where like it really surfaced all the different ways that I've innovated and put new processes into place and basically pitched it, got it approved, and it became org-wide things. And then the product side, and it's like, okay, like here's how many like things that I've shipped, here's what I could do, like here's my skill set and how I think about design in general and how it's related to my products. And so by trying to really touch on all those 3 and setting them up, like first we're going to talk about this and then we're going to talk about that, it painted a clear picture of like, these are my priorities, and this is like my past experience in these priorities, and this is how I would apply it to the next role. So yeah.
Great. Awesome. And then the next question is from Irene. What is a high level view of what a portfolio presentation should demonstrate for product design roles?
High level view of what should it contain. So for product design, you're really going to want to focus on the end to end. I mean, when we talk about UX portfolios, we're always like, oh, process and like show your work and like show everything. But with product design, you really have to not only show that you sort of understand the problem, but you really need to show your strategic chops and how you can lead an entire project and work with different people. Because I think one thing that's different with product design and say like UI UX is that when UI UX, you're kind of like in the middle, you're doing the things, but someone may hand you requirements, or someone may have a vision already in place, or someone may have some of those answers figured out, and you're sort of like caught in the middle here, where product design is like, you're going to be expected to like, what was the strategy behind this leading? What was this problem? How did you define it a little bit more than all of the UI UX obvious things? And then to the end, it's like, okay, like how did you then launch it? And then what were like, whether it's analytics, outcomes, any type of like data afterward that you followed up on. And so being able to show like true ownership of a product or beyond like different versions is what's going to shine for a product designer role specifically.
Yeah, that's great. And then the next one, could you provide a framework on how to move to the IC level to leadership level?
Can I provide a great framework?
Yeah, like so could you provide the framework on how to move? So I guess like maybe some suggestions on moving from IC to leadership. Like, is there, I guess like that's something we talked about too. Like, is it like, were you determined to say, oh, I kind of want to be? Because I think you have an interesting story to share on how you got into that leadership role. Because like, like, I think I did ask you that, like, I want to be a leader like one day, and then you just like look for a leadership position, or how that
Right.
works. I think you have a little story that like feel free to share if you want. And I guess like this is more like the questions is more to like tips on like how to transition on like framework referring to like what, like if I'm in an IC role, I do want to become a manager, like what are like steps, and like what are the things I should start doing, like that type of things.
Yeah, and I could actually reshare. I'm trying to remember his name. I think his name is Steve. I don't know if it's Steve Holm. I can't. I'm like trying to envision it. I could see his face because I know what he looks like. But yeah, essentially, like I mentioned, like he was with Snagit, and he created a framework, and he shared it outwardly on Twitter, and was like, "Hey, take it, use it internally if you want to like do anything with it. But if you promote it, give him credit, or if you post it, give him credit." And so I have the Excel sheet, essentially the Google sheet, so I can gladly link that to everyone if they want to see it. Like he put in the due diligence of that work. What I've done is go in and I've taken a look at like, what do I feel like the core skills and the additional expertise really mean, and then start looking at what does it mean over time. So some of the core skills and the expertise are a little bit different from his, but essentially it's like as you're moving along, it's like I wouldn't say grading you, but it's in levels of like whether it is communication, it is soft skill, leadership, how you're participating in the team, the difference between project managing one project and being in charge of that as a product designer, like as a senior designer, to turning more programs sort of holistically, and now you're working across multiple projects. Also the transition of whether you want to do people manager versus product design lead, and they have a different meaning of like you're going to be doing more strategy versus obviously more like people management. You're going to start like moving your hands off of the keyboard and off of the designs. And so it's a really great framework and a visual, and I wouldn't do it justice if I tried to explain it on the fly, but can happily send that to people if you guys are interested. I think there's a lot of them out there for different groups. I believe maybe whether it's like Airbnb or like if you search as well, there's some that exist out there already, but this one was super comprehensive and it seemed thorough. And I knew one tip that I got back at Amazon when we had a leveling guide as well, but it's internal. And one thing to do is like when you're going through and you have this set of sort of requirements or set of expectations, like it's asking you questions of have you done this. And I think next to it, a good rule of thumb to see like how much you're on track is to like take an example and put an actual, like take a requirement that it's saying and put an example of when you did that thing. And so like like you can build your own Excel sheet. And so if it's like, oh, you've led the meeting doing this, and then it'll be like, oh, there's that one time I talked to leadership that one time. And as you start seeing yourself basically doing all of these items in the next level up is when you know that like you're starting to transition. And they always say that like you should probably be consistently doing the next level hires responsibilities than you are for probably about 6 months before you get promoted, or probably a while at least consistently before a company will promote you into that role. Most of the time, not all the time, but so it's a good rule of thumb of just knowing that you may be doing all of your work awesome, but then start focusing on the next pillar and being like, am I hitting these things and consistently?
Yeah, I think that's a really great advice, because I like not all of us work from places who has this type of career development more structured, I would say, because I like a lot of places it's just kind of like you have your review and then you can talk about what you have done, and then by the end of the year you may forget what you have done all year long. And so it's
always
great to
document your work.
Yeah, exactly. It's great for like even if you're not like thinking about transitioning into leadership, like even if you're junior, I think it's good practice to start like in Excel sheets. As Natasha suggests, you just maybe list out things and maybe do like a monthly update on like a few things that you have like to overcome, like challenges that you overcome, or you could list out challenges that you haven't overcome yet, and then like maybe review it again in 6 months, and then maybe you're able to overcome some of the things that you were not able to. So I think that's like a great way to track your own progress if your manager is not already doing something like that for you. Great. And then the next question: what are some pain points you experience during the portfolio review process? John, I don't know if you mean like from a manager standpoint or from like a job candidate standpoint. That's Natasha, anything you have to say about that? Pain points about portfolio?
It from a manager position, or just in general?
I guess from a manager position, let's say that.
Okay. Pain points in the portfolio. I'm gonna take it as it's me presenting, not seeing a portfolio, right?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I would say some hard things from going into sort of a management portfolio or a leadership portfolio is just that the scope of things that you may be asked, and like I mentioned, like I was asked about product strategy, like it's just a different level of expectation, and I feel like it varies from each company, because I know I've spoken with other directors that were like, oh, I talked about design philosophy, and then I talked about, here are my best case studies and like what I'm great at. And then, but then there's like, with me, it was like, okay, I talked a little bit about my design philosophy, but then it was like, oh, I need to show them that I could like plan, because they asked for a strategy. So it was like a little bit about my work. It was mostly about like how I get things done and how I could get things done. And I think just the conversation was just very different. And being asked questions like, what's, how, like, have you ever like gone through, whether it's like adverse experiences in your life, and how does that make you like into who you are today, and like having grit, and can you, like there's just like different types of conversations, I think, to sort of challenge you on what's to come, or how you have to think with other leadership peers in mind, that are going to be larger than just your portfolio, larger than just design, and more just about like vision.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great answer. And then the next one, we're going to try to speed it up a little bit so we can address all the questions, because we're planning to end at 7:30. So the next one is soft skills related, bonding over shared frustration surrounding creative work becomes less and less appropriate as you climb the leadership ladder. How do you navigate setting those boundaries?
Can you say the first part of that?
So pretty much it's about like sharing your frustrations with your designers, for example, because like it's, as a manager, maybe you can't openly express how frustrated you are, or maybe you are, so that type of things. And so like how it's just that like once you get to a certain level, there are certain things that you just kind of have to withhold from the rest.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So how do you navigate setting those boundaries on like what to share?
Got it. Yeah. So an old director of mine, Jenny Lamb, who's an amazing leader and human being, she created this doc that was kind of like, it was her level set of when she first came into a team or a company. It kind of set the ground and the expectations. She shared it with me. She also said anyone could steal it, change it, use it. So I'm happy to share that with you all. But basically in the beginning, it's like, what can you expect from her as a leader, what she's going to expect from you, and sort of what, and everything from like, take time for yourself and wellness, to like, I will communicate to you with what I can share. And if I can't share it, I won't, but know that that I will be sharing it. Like, whether it's around communication or whether it's around like, your own health and wellness, and just and work-life balance. And so it kind of like is an outline of just like, here's the expectation. It was the first time I'd ever seen that before, but I know everyone like at the org kind of cheered, and all of us were like, this is awesome. Like, we've never seen it. And so a lot of people took it and was like, oh, I'm going to do this. I did it when I walked into MedBridge as well for the designers. So I think sort of trying to set that tone up front helps. If you're already in a situation where you're in the middle of it and you haven't set that tone correctly, I think it's just like, it probably would be a little bit of a level set of having a meeting of like, hey, like, how is the team progressing, and here's what we're doing.
I think that's great to level set at the beginning. I think that's like really helpful. And like one thing I have to say is that like as a manager, like I'm sure like there are projects that you enjoy more compared to others, and then doesn't. But then from a management position, it doesn't feel that you could share like how, like if you were to set the wrong impressions, or if you to like express, if you don't like, if you as a manager don't like a project, the people who work with you is not going to like the project. So I think that's definitely like a fine line that you have to like walk to be careful.
And I think finding a peer or someone at your level or otherwise that's not your design team to be like your buddy to sort of like in these challenging moments can talk to is crucial. I know I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. I swear, like the design leaders Slack channel is like, I've seen so many topics come up that like, I'm like, oh, I'm having that issue.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the people that I know that may be in those roles, like back at Amazon or whatever, like everyone's busy. Like either there's like the people I know are busy working, busy having families, busy doing whatever. And so you don't always have those moments to like have that person, like have that phone where you're just, so like this Slack channel has just, there's so many active people talking about those things. And personally, that's what I've used as to like, okay, I can't talk about this over here, but I can get some advice over here, and just like having one outlet to go separately.
I love that advice, because like it definitely, I agree, like sometimes if you're not able to share with one group, then maybe find other peers that you can share with. Okay, next question. How do you evangelize human-centered design without stepping on the toes or hurting egos of traditional designers or art directors?
So one thing I've tried to do is like when you're approaching human-centered design, I think it's treating it more of like a brown bag, as you call it, like a lunch and learn. And so this concept of like, hey, well, this is what human-centered design is, and this is kind of like how I think and like where we're coming from. And it comes across differently than saying like, you know, this is better than the old process or the old way of thinking, because honestly, like it all can exist in different industries, in different areas. Like being art directors, creative directors, you know, old design, like, you know, old versions of design, however that means, like that still works and makes sense in so many places and so many companies. And then like human-centered works in a lot of other ways. And so I think it's just like being empathetic and mindful of like, where did this person come from? What was their background? And like help them be interested and curious into like where you're trying to go. So if it's like, I'm trying to bring everyone into this sort of like human-centered design. And like me, I'm trying to bring everyone to like into what is product design. Like, let's understand what product design is. I think it's just really showing like, hey, let's have a lunch and learn or brown bag of like, this is what this means. And like, you kind of just show it more objectively. And then if you want to get into the interweavings of like, this is how this works here, and this is how these other things, swim lanes, work together. And then you kind of paint the picture of how it could work together. So.
And that's great advice. And like speaking for myself, since I did transition from more of the graphic design art directions into UX too, is that I feel like even for traditional art directors, designers, you still, I mean, some of the UX strategies still apply because you still do research. So imagine if you're designing for a logo, you still need to do research. You still need to figure out what the business is about. You still need to figure out who the audience is. So I feel like designers in general, even if they didn't study UX specifically per se, there are some skills from UX that they're already using in that design process. So that's I would say like most designers that's I have come across are open to like learning more about the human-centered design, and like because they already are thinking about the audience, it's just kind of like a different perspective, a different way to look into it, and with specific tools and process to achieve that. Great. And then next question. Thanks for taking your time. This is from Bethany. How did you personally choose to move your career path from Amazon to MedBridge? That's a good one.
Yeah. So I think for me at that time, it was funny because this probably goes to the story that I was telling you. It's like, I knew that I was at a junction of like, I had outperformed my current role, and I was still like trying to decide, like, do I put in more time at Amazon to get promoted to the next level, honestly. And so like, I was doing great work. I like loved the team. I loved it, but it was just kind of like, okay, I've been here now for 4.5 years. Like, where do I want to go? And I told myself that when I left Amazon, that I was going to work for a company that was specifically serving the greater good. And that was like their mission, potentially a smaller company as well. And so I kind of like had that vaguely in mind of what I wanted to do next. And honestly, like, I wasn't actively looking when this opportunity came. I actually got presented it by a recruiter. And so when I saw it, I was just like, oh, this could be cool. I honestly didn't even know if I would get the role. I was like, this is far beyond, but it came to me, and I just was open. And I think just being curious and was just like, well, let's see how it goes. I don't know. We'll see. And so I think being able to hear what the role was about, what MedBridge was about, like how they were, helping patients' lives, like it was enough to where everything was kind of intersecting in that moment. And either I could like jump on it, even though I was scared, but knew I would learn so much in these next 3 years or in the next couple years than I would if I stayed in the current position I was at, specifically at Amazon. So it was a hard choice of thinking to move, because I love Amazon. But at this moment in time, like, it just made sense for me in my career. And the great thing about when you're thinking about moving companies or levels or what have you is like, it always needs to apply to where you're at in your career and what you're specifically trying to grow in or accomplish, and less about like, I don't know, like less about just like whether it's like brand loyalty or like company loyalty or what have you. But I think it's just like where you're at specifically in your career and what you need to get out of it. And I think that'll help kind of guide you along and make different decisions. And maybe sometimes it's like jumping to an agency. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's large. It just depends on what you're specifically trying to gain.
Yeah, exactly. And last but not least, Carrie, if you're still around, we're getting to your question. And I'm sorry it took us so long, because I know you're one of the first to pose a question. So what Carrie's question is, what advice do you have if I'm going from a project management role over all of software development to manager over UX HCD? I've been studying and attending UX conferences for years. So from what I understand is that you are currently a program manager, and that you want to become a manager, or you are transitioning into a manager for UX and HCD, and you're looking for advice
on how to transition from one to, is it a
manager
one to one? Yeah.
So it's like, because I like, when I think about program manager, there's a lot of management skills that can apply to UX, right? So Natasha, what do you think?
Yeah, I think even just working within, if you're already a program manager and already working with dev, I mean, I want to say that's half the battle. Like it's part of the battle of moving over, because you're still going to be working with sort of the same people and have some of the similar, peers and collaboration. And I think at least that experience as you transition over would then be helpful, because ultimately, like I said, like when you're going higher into management, you have to work with your PM and your devs, and that's how everything gets done. And so being able to take the skills that you have there. And if you've gone to UX conferences, or if you've gone and done some training, or you're putting some things together, I would really emphasize on sort of what you've learned in the skill sets around soft skills, collaboration, working with, working in your current roles and who you worked with, because I bet there's going to be a lot that actually transition that you will need to have or need to be able to do as a UX manager role. So
great, awesome. And so there's one, I think we have a few more minutes, so we can go ahead and answer this one question. Okay.
Can I say one thing real fast? I just wanted to say that the person who made the design or the levels, career levels framework, his name is Peter Merholz. His name is not Steve, it's Peter Merholz, but I know I said that, so I feel like I had to say that.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that so that we don't look at the wrong one.
Yeah.
And so this is the question. Can you give an example of interaction design project that you're currently working on? Maybe just like a high level of what it is, what you're working on.
An interaction design project I'm currently working on. Well, I would probably have to say the team, since I'm not in the weeds of the interaction design. But
right.
yeah, so one project that we recently actually announced, it's on our site now. It's telehealth, and so we're able to provide virtual visits for providers with patients and help triage them so they don't have to come into the hospitals. And it's also been really great, obviously, right now because of COVID. It's another tool and a solution to use so people can stay well. And so we've put out sort of the very first like MVP version of that. But one of our designers is really going in deep on like, what does that mean for continuous versions? And so telehealth is like our newest product that we're launching. So there's a lot of interaction design, big thinking, and like how do we continue to make it better there. So that's one of the projects that that we just launched, still actively working on, for sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, more questions just popped up. So we can go ahead and go for it. And Natasha, if you need to stop, just let me know.
No, you're fine.
So, okay. What's the biggest...
I'll take a drink of water while
okay, yeah, do it, please. And thank you so much, Natasha. And what's the biggest difference between working at a company like Amazon to a smaller company like MedBridge? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, I feel like I guess there's two big differences, but one big difference is that when you work at a smaller company, you are seen and more visible to the sense of like your decisions and the way you show up and the way you make design it goes further and farther faster. So like you're a smaller company, you can bring your expertise, your ideas, what have you, and you have more opportunity to like penetrate that throughout the company and higher levels, easier and faster than you would at a bigger place like Amazon. On the other side, though, when coming from usually a big company to smaller, is Amazon has a lot of resources. And so the concept of like, there's resources for headcount, there's resources for people that do specific things. There's a lot of things that happen at larger companies that we may take for granted, and when you're in the middle of it, or like, oh, this feels normal, and then when you go to a small company and you realize you might be taking 10 steps backwards in certain aspects because it's not set up yet, or it just doesn't have that structure, it's not resourced, like that's probably also a big reality and difference. And to a lot of people, that's awesome. It's challenging. It makes you like motivated to like get in there and put your stamp on it. That was one of the reasons for me. But at the same time, a lot of times for people that going from a place that feels like there's structure and knowns and maybe a little bit less ambiguity to somewhere that, is more, everyone's still trying to figure it out. And, you have to like understand that that's where that's at and if that's what you want.
Yeah. Good point. So everyone, we're going to do one last question and then we're going to call it good for the night. And we can definitely share Natasha's contact if you're interested in speaking a little bit more with her. And she's also on our Ladies That UX Slack channel that you can find her from there too. So here we go with the last one. What type of research methods you prefer at MedBridge projects?
what type do we prefer at
Yeah,
MedBridge?
research methods.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do, like, in the beginning for discovery, we'll do user interviews. We do our stakeholder interviews internally. We also do them with clients. And then with our users, we have 4 different settings where it's like we're at hospitals, we're at like long-term home care, like home health. And then we also have sort of this private practice in the middle. So there's 4 different sectors, and depending on, like, if it's a new space that we don't know, we'll go out and do field studies to sort of learn how they're using our products, or if we're just trying to understand their day-to-day. And then if it's something that we're iterating on, that maybe it just needs a follow-up with user interviews as well. So there's a few research methods we do there. We also, like I said, we do usability testing as well to gain insights. I know that we've done like competitive analysis as well. So we've done a handful of them, and I've also instructed the designers too, and just anyone. It's like, again, it's like you understand the world of like, hey, there's like 50 different ways plus, I don't know, how to do research and research methods. And it's like, once you know the type of tool you need for the job, you end up focusing on that. So while I think there's additional research ways that we could do, like whether it's diary studies or going out and doing some other varieties, the ones that I've seen thus far are those that I mentioned. So.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much, Nastasia, for answering all those questions, and thank you for being flexible with your time. And yeah, I really appreciate that personally, like from the first conversation that we have to today, we're actually having this event, and I think it's great. And thank you for being the brave one to be the first ever in the leadership series. By the way, everyone, I want to call out that Nastasia, actually the design of the title card with the illustrated lettering for Ladies at UX Leadership Series. And so thank you so much for doing that as well. And I really enjoy our conversation. I really love like learning a little bit more about where you're at and like what you're doing next.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. This has been great. And like I said, it's always good to have these types of conversations as well at the leadership level, at the management level, because it's a new set of things you're going to hear, versus some of the other things you may have already heard. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, we would love to continue the series. So for everybody who are in a management positions or leadership positions, if you're interested in speaking, let us know. So this is the first one. We are doing it more in like an interview format where we just do a bunch of Q&As, but we could also potentially talk about like other different style and formats. If you have ideas, send a message to us. And for the resources that we talked about today, we will share it on our Slack page, and we'll also send an email out so everybody has it. This event is recorded. I'll need to speak with everybody to see if we need to do a cut of it or if we share that fully. So we can talk about that later, Nastasia.
Okay.
And great, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Clara, Chara, Jane from the San Francisco chapter, just so I recall all the names. And thank you, Alexis and Baba from the Seattle chapter for making this happen. It was our first ever Zoom. I think it went pretty well. Nothing stopped. Internet's okay, thank God. So yeah, and more to come, hopefully.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone. Reach out, find me on LinkedIn or Slack if you have any questions.